I never thought I would be telling this story. My husband Greg and I were married for 22 years when I discovered he was having an affair with my son Jason's 18-year-old girlfriend Amber. The betrayal was devastating enough. But as I began investigating, I uncovered a web of lies that spanned our entire marriage. Secret accounts, inappropriate relationships with other young women, and financial deception that threatened to destroy not just my heart, but our family's future. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, this story might resonate with you. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about overcoming life's most painful betrayals. When I met Greg at 23, I thought I had found my perfect match. He was ambitious, charming, and seemed completely devoted to building a future together. We had both graduated from the University of Michigan, though we met later at a mutual friend's barbecue in our hometown of Ann Arbor. Greg was working as an entry-level financial advisor while I had just started my career in elementary education. Our early years together were everything I had dreamed a marriage could be. We worked hard, saved for a house in a good school district, and spent weekends hiking and camping in the Michigan wilderness. Greg would surprise me with picnics by the lake or spontaneous weekend getaways. When I look back at photos from those first few years, our smiles were genuine. There was an innocence to our love that I mourn deeply now. When I became pregnant with Jason 3 years into our marriage, Greg seemed thrilled. He painted the nursery himself, assembled furniture late into the night, and read parenting books alongside me. During my difficult delivery, he stayed by my side for 36 hours, never leaving even when nurses suggested he rest. The image of Greg holding our newborn son, tears in his eyes as he promised to always protect him, is forever burned into my memory. How painfully ironic those promises would become. Jason was our only child, though not by choice. Complications during his birth left me unable to have more children. Greg assured me that one perfect child was more than enough for him. We poured all our love and attention into raising Jason, perhaps too much at times. Greg coached his Little League teams, taught him to fish, and spent hours helping with science fair projects. From the outside, we were the picture of American family success. As Jason grew into his teenage years, he maintained the same close relationship with his father. They bonded over sports cars and later college plans. Jason was academically gifted, particularly in mathematics and engineering, taking after Greg's analytical mind. By his junior year of high school, he was already receiving interest from prestigious universities. I continued teaching 4th grade at the local elementary school, finding fulfillment in my career while maintaining our home life. Greg had advanced in his financial career, becoming a senior wealth management advisor at a respected firm. His increased income allowed us to renovate our home, take nicer vacations, and start a substantial college fund for Jason. I was proud of what we had built together. When Jason began his senior year of high school, he started dating Amber Johnson. She was in several of his advanced placement classes and worked part-time at the local mall. The first time Jason brought her home for dinner, I was immediately struck by her beauty and intelligence. She had long auburn hair, was strikingly mature for her age, and spoke confidently about her plans to study business at Michigan State. Greg seemed particularly impressed with Amber, asking her numerous questions about her interests and ambitions. At the time, I interpreted his attention as fatherly interest in our son's first serious girlfriend. Amber began spending more time at our house, often studying with Jason in the dining room, or watching movies in the basement rec room. She was unfailingly polite, always offering to help with dishes or bringing small gifts when invited for dinner. In retrospect, there were subtle signs I should have noticed. Greg began arriving home later from work on evenings when he knew Amber would be at the house. He took a sudden interest in attending Jason's school events where she might be present. He upgraded his wardrobe and started working out more consistently. I attributed these changes to a predictable midlife desire to maintain his youth, never imagining the true motivation. Our marriage had settled into comfortable familiarity. While we no longer shared the passionate romance of our early years, I believed we had transitioned to a deeper, more mature love based on our shared history and family. We still had date nights, usually dinner and a movie every other Friday. We took weekend trips to Chicago a few times a year. Physical intimacy had become less frequent but still present. If Greg seemed occasionally distant or preoccupied, I blamed work stress or the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. The summer after Jason's graduation was filled with preparations for his departure to Stanford University, where he had received a partial academic scholarship. Greg insisted on upgrading Jason's laptop, buying him new clothes, and completely refurnishing his bedroom as a coming-home gift for holiday breaks. I found his generosity touching another sign of his devotion to our son. Jason and Amber had decided to try a long-distance relationship when he left for California, and she began at Michigan State. They spent most of that summer together, often at our house, since her parents both worked full-time. I encouraged their time together, remembering my own college transition and how difficult separation from my high school boyfriend had been. The last family vacation before Jason left for college was a 2-week trip to Hawaii. I spent months planning it, wanting everything to be perfect for our last extended time together before this new chapter began. The photos from that trip show a smiling, sunburned family snorkeling, hiking volcanic trails, and enjoying luau performances. Not once did I detect anything amiss, though now I wonder if there were clues in the way Greg volunteered to stay back at the hotel one afternoon when Amber called Jason about a family emergency back home. Looking back, I realize my trust was so complete that I had become blind. The foundation of our family seemed unshakable. The life we had built felt permanent and secure. I had no idea that everything was about to crumble beneath my feet in the most painful way imaginable. The discovery happened on a rainy Tuesday, in October, 2 months after we had driven Jason to Stanford. I had taken the day off work with a migraine and was resting in our bedroom when Greg's work laptop chimed with an incoming message. Thinking it might be important, I glanced at the screen expecting to see a client or colleague's name. Instead, I saw a message preview from Amber. "Last night was amazing. I cannot stop thinking about what you did to me." My first thought was that I had misread it. Perhaps it was meant for Jason and somehow routing through Greg's computer. Or maybe it was work-related, and I was missing context. The rational part of my brain created excuses, while my instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. With shaking hands, I opened the laptop. The message chain between Greg and Amber went back months. Explicit texts, arrangements to meet when Jason was busy with graduation events, plans for her to accidentally run into Greg at his gym. The most recent messages confirmed they had been together the previous night while I attended a school fundraiser, and Jason was 3,000 miles away at college. I sat motionless for nearly an hour reading through their exchanges. My husband of 22 years and my son's girlfriend. The betrayal was so multi-layered, so devastating I could barely process it. Greg had not only cheated on me, but had also betrayed our son in the most fundamental way possible. As the initial shock began to subside, something else caught my attention. References in their messages to Greg's separate apartment in the city accounts I knew nothing about, and discussions about their future once certain arrangements were made. My investigative instincts took over despite my emotional devastation. I began searching through Greg's files, finding folders protected with passwords. Using our anniversary date, a common password he reused, I gained access to documents revealing the true extent of his deception. Greg had been maintaining a secret apartment in Detroit for at least 3 years. Financial statements showed transfers to accounts I had never seen totaling nearly $300,000 over the past 5 years. There were communications with other women before Amber, some possibly even younger. When Greg arrived home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with printouts of the most damning evidence. His face registered first confusion, then shock, and finally a cold calculation that sent chills through me. This was not the face of my husband, but of a stranger I had somehow never truly known. "How long have you been sleeping with our son's girlfriend?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the nausea threatening to overwhelm me. "This is not what it looks like," he began, using the most cliché line possible. "Amber and I have a connection, yes, but it only became physical after she turned 18. I would never." After she turned 18, I interrupted, disgusted. "And that makes it acceptable to betray both your wife and your son." "She is barely an adult, Greg. She is dating our child." What followed was a 3-hour confrontation that revealed the man I had built my life around was a carefully constructed facade. Greg admitted the affair had begun emotionally months earlier, when he drove Amber home from a school event. Physical intimacy started shortly after her 18th birthday, continuing through the summer while Jason prepared for college. He showed little genuine remorse. Instead, seeming irritated at being caught. When I confronted him about the financial deception, his demeanor changed from defensive to threatening. He informed me coldly that most assets were protected in accounts I could not access, and that fighting him would only drain what resources we had left. The family home, he reminded me, was primarily in his name, due to a refinancing I had signed off on years earlier, without thoroughly reviewing the documents. "What about Jason?" I asked, still unable to comprehend how he could betray our son so completely. "Jason will be fine," Greg responded dismissively. "He is young, brilliant, with his whole life ahead of him. Amber was never right for him anyway." That was the moment I knew our marriage was irretrievably broken. Not just because of the affair or the financial deception, but because the person speaking to me was fundamentally incapable of understanding the devastation he had caused. The hardest decision was whether to tell Jason immediately or wait until he had completed his first semester exams. Ultimately, I could not bear for him to hear about this betrayal from anyone else. With my sister at my side for support, I video called him the next day. Watching my son's face as I carefully explained what I had discovered was one of the most painful experiences of my life. His expression transformed from confusion to disbelief, to a raw anguish that no parent ever wants to witness. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. Dad did what with my Amber I had anticipated anger. But Jason's reaction was worse. He became completely still, his brilliant mind visibly struggling to reconcile this new reality with everything he had believed about his father and his girlfriend. Then he quietly disconnected the call. For the next 48 hours, he would not respond to messages or calls from either of us. While waiting desperately to hear from Jason, I learned Amber had already ended their relationship a week earlier, with vague explanations about growing apart and wanting different things. The calculated cruelty of this timing suggested Greg had orchestrated the breakup to minimize suspicion. When Jason finally called back, he was simultaneously devastated and determined. He had contacted his academic advisor and arranged to take his exams early, allowing him to return home and deal with the situation directly. Despite my protests about interrupting his studies, he insisted on facing this head-on. The confrontation between father and son happened in our living room 3 days later. Greg attempted explanations and justifications that rang hollow in the face of Jason's direct questions. When Jason asked, "Did you ever think about what this would do to me?" Greg had no adequate response. My son, only 18 years old, showed more maturity and moral clarity than his father ever had. Jason left the house that night to stay with my sister, unable to remain under the same roof as Greg. Before leaving, he hugged me tightly and whispered, "This is not your fault, Mom. Not any of it." Within a week, Greg had moved out ostensibly to give us space, but in reality to his secret apartment where Amber had already been staying part-time. The speed with which they established their life together confirmed this had been planned well in advance. My 22-year marriage had ended, and my son had lost both his father figure and his first love in one traumatic blow. The months following Greg's departure were a blur of legal consultations, therapy appointments, and sleepless nights. Despite Greg's threats, I secured an excellent divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving hidden assets. The financial picture was worse than I initially feared. Greg had systematically moved money for years, creating a complex web of accounts and investments designed to shield resources from potential divorce proceedings. My teaching salary alone could not cover our mortgage, and I faced the prospect of losing our family home. Friends rallied around me, offering temporary loans and practical support, but the financial reality was grim. The attorney fees alone threatened to deplete my modest savings. Meanwhile, Jason returned to Stanford after winter break, throwing himself into his studies with an intensity that worried me. He spoke with his therapist twice weekly via video calls, but rarely discussed his feelings about the betrayal directly with me. When we did talk, he was supportive but distant, as if processing the situation from behind an emotional wall. The most painful aspect was watching my son's trust in relationships crumble. The dual betrayal by his father and girlfriend left deep wounds. He deleted all social media accounts, cut contact with many high school friends who might have connections to Amber, and showed no interest in dating. His academic performance remained exceptional, but his previously outgoing personality had retreated inward. 3 months after Greg's departure, Amber's parents discovered the relationship and its timeline. Their disgust and anger led to a complete estrangement from their daughter. Amber's mother contacted me tearfully apologizing, though she had nothing to apologize for. We met for coffee. Two women devastated by the actions of people we had trusted and loved. She was always a good girl before this, Mrs. Johnson said, clutching her coffee cup with trembling hands. I do not understand how he manipulated her into this. She was just a child when it started. Her words crystallized, something I had been struggling to articulate. While Amber had participated in the betrayal, the true predator was Greg. His position of authority as her boyfriend's father, his age and financial power, and his deliberate grooming created an inherent imbalance. This realization did not eliminate Amber's responsibility, but placed Greg's actions in an even more despicable light. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 14 months, as Greg used every legal maneuver to protect his assets. My attorney discovered evidence of similar, inappropriate relationships with other young women, creating a pattern that strengthened my position. Ultimately, the court ordered a more equitable division than Greg had anticipated, though the legal fees consumed much of my settlement. I was forced to sell our family home, the place where Jason had grown up and where I had expected to live for many more years. Each room packed away represented another piece of our former life dismantled. The kitchen where we had shared family meals, the backyard where Greg had taught Jason to throw a baseball, the living room where we had opened Christmas presents for 2 decades. Losing these spaces felt like losing the physical evidence that our family had once been real and whole. Throughout this period, Greg and Amber continued their relationship openly, apparently unconcerned with the destruction left in their wake. They purchased a luxury condominium downtown, took exotic vacations documented on Amber's reinstated social media accounts, and generally lived as if their relationship had not been born from the ruins of a family. Jason refused all contact with his father despite Greg's occasional messages claiming he still wanted a relationship with his son. When Greg sent an expensive gift for Jason's 19th birthday, it was returned unopened with a note that simply read, "I do not have a father." I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment closer to my school, focusing on rebuilding my life one day at a time. Financial constraints forced me to take on tutoring work during evenings and weekends. The exhaustion was sometimes overwhelming, but the additional income provided a small cushion of security. The most unexpected challenge was navigating my new identity. For 22 years, I had been Greg's wife and Jason's mother. Now, at 45, I had to rediscover who I was outside those roles. Dating seemed impossible, my trust too severely damaged to consider sharing my life with someone new. Instead, I focused on strengthening friendships, exploring interests I had neglected during my marriage, and creating a stable home for Jason's academic breaks. When Jason returned for summer after his freshman year, I noticed subtle positive changes. The wall he had erected began showing small cracks. He spoke more openly about his feelings, engaged with a few old friends, and even mentioned a study group partner he found interesting. His therapist had helped him understand that not all relationships would end in betrayal. I think the worst part, Jason told me one evening as we walked through a local park, was realizing that my entire childhood was based on a lie. Every memory of Dad teaching me something or giving me advice is now contaminated. How do I know what was real? I had no perfect answer for him. Only the truth. The love you felt was real. The lessons you learned were valuable. His failure as a husband and father does not erase the good parts of your childhood, even if they now exist alongside this pain. That conversation marked a turning point in our healing journey. Jason and I began rebuilding not just as mother and son, but as two people recovering from the same trauma, supporting each other through the process. The first real breakthrough in my healing came through an unexpected source, a support group for people who had experienced similar betrayals. My therapist had recommended it for months, but I had resisted not wanting to share my pain with strangers. When I finally attended, I found profound comfort in the community of people who truly understood the unique anguish of having trusted someone completely only to discover they were capable of extraordinary deception. In that safe space, I could express the complicated emotions that friends and family struggled to understand, the humiliation of being betrayed so publicly, the confusion of still occasionally missing the man I thought I had married, the fear that I had somehow contributed to the situation through my own blindness. These feelings, I learned, were normal parts of the recovery process. Through the group, I met Diane, a woman whose husband had similarly betrayed her with a much younger woman. Her strength and eventual happiness 5 years post-divorce offered a vision of what my future might hold. We began meeting for coffee outside of group sessions, forming a friendship based on mutual understanding and shared resilience. The thing that finally freed me, Diane told me, was realizing that his choices reflected his character, not my worth. I stopped asking what I could have done differently and started building the life I deserved all along. Her words became something of a mantra as I navigated my new independence. Instead of viewing myself as a victim, I began recognizing my capacity for growth and change. I enrolled in graduate courses toward a school counseling certification, hoping to eventually help students navigating their own family traumas. The intellectual stimulation and sense of purpose provided another pathway to healing. 2 years after the discovery, I received news that altered my perspective again. Amber's mother contacted me to share that Amber had left Greg, finally recognizing the manipulative nature of their relationship. She had moved back to her parents' home, started therapy, and was attempting to rebuild her life. While I could not yet find forgiveness for her role in the destruction of my family, I felt a certain compassion for her journey. Jason's healing progressed along a different timeline. During his junior year at Stanford, he began dating seriously for the first time since Amber. His girlfriend Lila was a graduate engineering student, whose patient understanding helped him rebuild trust. When he brought her home during spring break, seeing him relaxed and happy in a healthy relationship felt like witnessing a small miracle. "How did you know you could trust again?" I asked him one evening while Lila was out with friends. "I did not know," he answered thoughtfully. "I just decided that living in fear of betrayal forever meant Dad and Amber would still have power over my life. I did not want to give them that." His wisdom humbled me. While I had made progress in many areas, romantic relationships remained a closed door. Jason's courage inspired me to at least consider the possibility that I might someday be ready to trust again. The final piece of my healing journey came through forgiveness, not of Greg or Amber, whose actions had caused such profound harm, but of myself. For 2 years I had carried the weight of not having seen the signs, of having trusted blindly, of having somehow failed to protect my son from this pain. Working through this self-blame was perhaps the most difficult challenge of all. My breakthrough came during a particularly powerful therapy session. After describing yet another missed sign from the past, my therapist asked simply, "Would you blame another woman in your situation for not recognizing these subtle clues in a 22-year marriage built on deliberate deception?" The question stopped me short. Of course I would not. I would tell her that trust is the foundation of marriage, that constant suspicion is no way to live, that her husband's capacity for deception reflected his character flaws, not her failures. Why, then, was I unable to extend the same compassion to myself? Gradually, I learned to release the self-recrimination. I acknowledged that while the betrayal had changed me, it did not define me. The woman who had loved and trusted completely was not weak or foolish. She was exactly who I was supposed to be. The fact that her trust had been violated did not diminish the beauty of her capacity for love. 3 years after discovering Greg's betrayal, my life had found a new equilibrium. I had completed my counseling certification and transitioned to a role at the high school working with students navigating family challenges. My financial situation had stabilized through careful planning and the final divorce settlement. Jason was thriving in his senior year at Stanford, with graduate school acceptances already arriving. Greg and Amber had ended their relationship predictably when a younger woman entered the picture. I heard this news with detached interest, like learning about characters in a book I had put down years ago. Their power to hurt me had diminished to almost nothing. The most unexpected development was my cautious entry back into dating. At 48, I met Daniel, a divorced English professor with grown children, at a faculty development workshop. Our relationship progressed slowly, built on honest communication and mutual respect. I was transparent about my past and my lingering trust issues. His patience and understanding created space for me to rediscover intimacy without fear. Looking back at the journey from devastation to rebuilding, I recognize now that healing is not a destination, but a continuing process. Some days still bring flashes of pain or anger. Some memories still sting when they surface unexpectedly. But these moments no longer derail me as they once did. The family I had has gone transformed into something different but still valuable. Jason and I share a deeper bond forged through mutual support during our darkest days. He plans to bring Lila home for the holidays, perhaps with an engagement announcement on the horizon. My relationship with Daniel continues to evolve with cautious optimism. If there is wisdom to be gained from this painful chapter, it is this: resilience comes not from avoiding betrayal or pain, but from discovering your capacity to rebuild after devastation. Trust once shattered can be reclaimed, not as blind faith, but as a conscious choice made with clear eyes. And family, I have learned, is defined not by perfect histories, but by people who choose to walk together through both darkness and light. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? How did you find the strength to trust again? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more journeys of healing and resilience. And if you know someone struggling to find hope after betrayal, share this video as a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your past pain does not determine your future happiness.